What did you just do?
Don't let him eat that.
She's crazy.
Stop.
Explain.
Don't let him eat that. She attacked us. She's crazy.
What's happening? Is that Dominic? Oh my God. Explain.
The Black Ember was not a restaurant for ordinary people. It stood on a quiet street in Manhattan's financial district, its dark glass windows reflecting the city lights like polished stone. Inside, the air always smelled of truffle oil, aged wine, and expensive perfume. The lighting was soft and golden. The tables were set with crystal glasses and silver cutlery that shone like mirrors. Conversations were low and controlled. No one laughed too loudly. No one caused a scene. At the Black Ember, power sat at every table. Ava Reynolds tied her apron tightly around her waist and checked her reflection in the service mirror. Her eyes looked tired. She had been working double shifts for almost 3 weeks. Every morning she woke up before sunrise. Every night she returned home after midnight. Her mother's hospital bills had swallowed everything. Insurance had not covered all the treatments. The debt collectors had begun calling daily. Ava did not have the luxury of rest. She had only one goal: work enough hours to keep the bills from growing. She picked up a tray and forced a calm expression onto her face. Tonight was important. Dominic Kane was dining. Even the kitchen staff whispered his name carefully. Dominic Kane was 32 years old and already one of the most feared men in New York. He owned construction companies, shipping firms, security contracts, at least officially. Unofficially, everyone knew he ruled something much darker. People did not say the word Mafia out loud, but they did not need to. When Ava stepped into the main dining room, she saw him immediately. He sat at the center table, his posture straight, his presence heavy. His charcoal suit fit perfectly across his broad shoulders. His dark hair was slicked back. His expression was calm, but there was something dangerous in the way his eyes moved across the room. He missed nothing. To his right sat Madeline Crawford. Madeline was beautiful in a cold, polished way. Her blonde hair fell neatly over her shoulders. She wore an emerald silk dress that caught the light each time she shifted. She was the daughter of Senator Richard Crawford. The engagement between her and Dominic had been announced only months earlier. Newspapers had called it a powerful union. Across from them sat a small boy, Ethan. He looked too serious for 6 years old. His dark curls framed his face. His small hands rested politely near his plate. He watched the room quietly, as if he had already learned that silence was safer than noise. Ava approached with a bottle of sparkling water. "Sparkling water," Dominic said without looking up. "Yes, sir," Ava replied softly. She poured carefully, making sure not to spill a single drop. "And for Ethan," Madeline added sweetly, placing her manicured hand lightly on Dominic's sleeve, "I asked the chef to prepare his favorite chocolate soufflé, with hazelnut garnish." Ava paused for half a second. The Black Ember rarely accepted special requests. The head chef was proud and strict. But Ava said nothing. It was not her place to question. Dominic looked at his son. "You hungry?" Ethan hesitated. His eyes flickered toward Madeline before dropping to the table. "I can eat a little," he said quietly. Madeline smiled. "I'll check on it myself," she said, standing from the table. Her dress brushed softly against the floor as she walked toward the kitchen hallway. Ava watched her. Something felt wrong. She could not explain it clearly. It was just a small feeling in her chest. The way Madeline held her clutch bag tightly before disappearing into the kitchen corridor. The way her smile seemed stretched. 5 minutes later, Madeline returned. A busboy followed her carrying a silver tray. On it sat a crystal bowl filled with rich, dark chocolate soufflé. But instead of letting the busboy place it down, Madeline took the bowl herself. She set it directly in front of Ethan. "Here we are," she said brightly. "Eat up." Ava stepped slightly closer, ready to serve another table nearby. The dessert looked perfect. Smooth. Glossy. Beautiful. But when the chandelier light reflected off the rim of the bowl, Ava saw something. A faint white shimmer. Almost invisible. To anyone else it would look like sugar. But Ava knew better. Before she became a waitress, she had studied nursing. 2 years of classes. 2 years of hospital training. She had seen crushed medication before. She knew what powdered tablets looked like when they were not fully dissolved. Her heart began to pound. Ethan picked up his spoon. Madeline was watching him closely. Too closely. She was not eating her own food. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table. Her breathing looked shallow. Ethan lifted a spoonful of chocolate toward his mouth. 3 seconds. Ava did not think about her job. She did not think about Dominic Kane's reputation. She moved. "Stop." Her voice cut through the dining room. Chairs scraped the floor. Conversations ended instantly. Ethan froze. The spoon hovered inches from his lips. Ava rushed forward and slapped the spoon from his hand. Chocolate
you just
splattered
do?
across the
Don't
white
let him eat
tablecloth
that
and
shit,
onto
right?
Dominic's suit.
Explain.
Gasps echoed around the room. For one long second, no one moved. Then Dominic stood. In one smooth motion, a black handgun appeared in his hand. He did not point it at Ava. He stepped slightly in front of Ethan instead. "What did you just do?" he asked quietly. His voice was calm. Too calm. Madeline jumped to her feet. "She's crazy," she shouted. "She attacked us." Ava raised her shaking hands. "Look at the rim of the bowl," she said, forcing her voice steady. "It's not sugar. It's crushed tablets." She went into the kitchen alone. "You liar." Madeline snapped. "She's making it up." Dominic did not speak immediately. He leaned down. He ran his fingers slowly along the rim of the bowl. White powder collected on his fingertip. He rubbed it between his fingers. Then he lifted it close to his nose. He inhaled slightly. His jaw tightened. He turned his head toward Madeline. "Why does my son's dessert smell like almonds and chemical binder?" he asked. Madeline's face lost its color. "The chef must have." "The chef has worked for my family for 20 years, Dominic interrupted. Without raising his voice, he said, "Lock the doors." Two large security men appeared from the shadows near the entrance. The restaurant doors were closed immediately. No one was allowed to leave. Madeline stepped back. "You can't do this. My father is a senator." "The moment you touched that bowl," Dominic said coldly, "you chose your side." Security grabbed her arms. She screamed as they dragged her toward the exit. The dining room remained silent, frozen in shock. Dominic turned back to Ava. "What is your name?" "Ava Reynolds." "You understand what you just accused her of?" "Yes." "And you are certain?" "Yes." He studied her face carefully. She did not look away. After a long moment, he holstered his gun. "You're coming with me," he said. Fear tightened her chest. "What?" "If you're right, you saved my son's life," he replied. "If you're wrong, you won't see tomorrow." An hour later, they were inside Dominic Kane's estate. The mansion sat outside the city, surrounded by iron gates and armed guards. A toxicology test was run immediately on the dessert residue. Grant, the head of security, returned with the results. "It's dioxin compound," he said. "High dose. Lethal for a child." Dominic closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, something inside him had hardened. His phone rang. He answered calmly. "Yes, Senator." Shouting could be heard faintly from the other end. "She's safe," Dominic said. "For now." There was a long pause. "If anyone comes near my son again," Dominic continued quietly, "I will end everything you built." He hung up. He turned to Ava. "You can't go home tonight," he said. Her stomach dropped. "Why?" "Because now," he replied, his eyes cold and focused, "this is war." And with that, the balance of power in New York shifted. All because a waitress refused to stay silent. The holding room beneath the Kane estate was nothing like the grand halls above it. There were no chandeliers. No polished marble. No warmth. The walls were concrete. The air was cold. A single fluorescent light buzzed faintly overhead. Madeline Crawford sat in a metal chair at the center of the room. Her emerald gown was wrinkled now. Her perfect hair had fallen loose around her shoulders. Her mascara had smudged under her eyes. The image of a senator's daughter had cracked. Dominic Kane stood several feet away, silent and still. He had removed his jacket, but his presence remained heavy. His expression was calm, but there was no softness in his eyes. Grant, the head of security, stood near the door. Ava Reynolds stayed behind Dominic. She did not want to be there, but Dominic had insisted. She was the reason Madeline had been exposed. She would witness what came next. Madeline looked up at Dominic, trying to regain control of her voice. "This is a misunderstanding," she said. "You're overreacting." Dominic did not respond. Grant stepped forward and placed a small silver pill case on the table beside Madeline. The inside of the case was dusted with white residue. "We tested it," Grant said. "Same compound as the powder on the bowl." Madeline's lips trembled, but she forced a laugh. "You think I would poison a child?" she asked. Dominic finally spoke. "Why does your father owe the Volkov syndicate $10 million? He asked quietly. Madeline's composure slipped for a second. Ava noticed. Dominic continued, his voice even. "The gambling debts. The private loans. The quiet meetings. Did you think I would not find out?" Madeline's eyes flickered toward the door. It wasn't supposed to be permanent, she said suddenly. They promised it would look natural. A heart condition. An allergic reaction. No one would suspect. The words hung in the air like smoke. Ava felt her stomach turn. Dominic's face did not change, but something colder settled into his expression. Say it clearly, he demanded. Madeline's shoulders shook. They said if Ethan was gone you would be unstable, she whispered. Easier to control. Easier to negotiate with. They would forgive my father's debt. It was supposed to secure our future. Our future? Dominic repeated. She looked up at him desperately. I did it for us, she insisted. For our position. For power. Dominic stepped closer. You tried to kill my son, he said. There is no us. Silence filled the room. Grant moved toward Madeline. Dominic raised a hand stopping him. No, Dominic said calmly. She will be handled properly. Madeline's breathing quickened. You can't end this engagement, she said. It will start a political war. Dominic stared at her without emotion. It already has. He turned away from her. To the guest quarters, he ordered Grant. She will remain under guard until I decide the next move. Madeline's protests echoed down the hallway as she was taken away. The heavy door closed. The silence that followed felt heavier than the shouting had been. Dominic remained standing, facing the concrete wall for several seconds. Ava watched him carefully. He was not shaking. He was not shouting. But the air around him felt charged, like the moment before a storm. He turned slowly toward Ava. You saved his life, he said. Ava swallowed. I just did what anyone would do. No, Dominic replied. Most people would have stayed silent. She did not answer. Dominic studied her for a moment, then motioned toward the stairs. Come upstairs. They entered his private office. Unlike the holding room, this space was warm and quiet. Dark wood shelves lined the walls. A large desk sat near the windows overlooking the estate grounds. Dominic poured himself a glass of water but did not drink it. He faced Ava. The Volkov syndicate believes removing Ethan will weaken me, he said. They are wrong. Ava stood near the doorway, unsure where to place her hands. What happens now? She asked. Now, Dominic replied, we respond carefully. He walked around the desk and pulled out a folder. I need to control the narrative, he said. Publicly I cannot appear shaken. I cannot appear alone. Ava frowned slightly. What does that have to do with me? Dominic opened the folder and slid a document across the desk toward her. It has everything to do with you. She stepped closer and looked down. The document was a formal agreement. Legal language filled the pages. At the bottom of the page, a number stood out. $1 million. Ava looked up sharply. What is this? A contract, Dominic said. A temporary engagement. She blinked. You're serious? Yes. He spoke calmly as if discussing business terms. Madeline's betrayal will become public soon. I cannot allow my enemies to see weakness. I need stability. I need the public to believe that my household remains strong. And you think I can provide that? She asked. You already have, he replied. You stood in front of a gun to protect my son. Ava stared at the number again. $1 million. It was more than enough to pay her mother's debts. More than enough to return to nursing school. More than enough to start over. In exchange, Dominic continued, you will wear my ring. Attend public events. Remain at the estate. Protect Ethan. Present unity. For how long? She asked quietly. Until the Volkov situation is resolved. Ava folded her arms. And if I say no? Dominic did not hesitate. I will arrange security for you for a short time. But once that ends you will be exposed. The Volkov family will not forget your role. She knew he was not threatening her. He was stating a fact. Ava lifted her chin. If I agree, she said slowly, I have conditions. Dominic's brow lifted slightly. Go on. I am not a prisoner, she said firmly. I can move freely within the estate. If Ethan is frightened, we leave any event immediately. No arguments. Dominic watched her carefully. And I will not be treated as decoration, she added. If I am doing this, I am doing it fully. A long pause filled the room. Then, slowly Dominic nodded. Agreed. He walked to a cabinet and removed a small velvet box. Ava's breath caught slightly. He opened it. Inside rested a large diamond ring set in platinum. It was heavy and elegant. It did not look new. It looked inherited. This is the Kane family ring, he said. Ava hesitated. This isn't temporary jewelry, she said. No, Dominic replied. It is symbolic. He stepped closer. Give me your hand. Her fingers trembled slightly as she extended them. Dominic slid the ring onto her finger. The weight surprised her. For a moment, their hands remained touching. Neither spoke. The air between them shifted slightly, not dramatic, not obvious, but noticeable. Dominic stepped back first. The announcement will be made in 2 days, he said, returning to business. The press will be told that we have grown close in recent months. Ava nodded slowly. She felt the weight of more than just the ring. That evening she was shown to a guest suite inside the estate. The room was larger than her entire apartment. She stood by the window, staring at the manicured grounds below. A gentle knock sounded at the door. It was Ethan. He held a small toy car in his hand. Are you staying? He asked quietly. Ava knelt down to his level. Yes, she said gently. If that's okay with you. He nodded slowly. Dad gets quiet when he's angry, Ethan said. But he's not mad at you. Ava smiled softly. I know. Ethan studied her hand. That's my mom's ring, he said. Ava's heart tightened. I'll take good care of it, she promised. Ethan hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged her quickly before running back down the hallway. Ava remained kneeling for a moment, surprised by the warmth of the gesture. Later that night, Dominic stood in the hallway outside her door. He did not knock. He simply listened as she spoke softly to Ethan inside the room, reassuring him that he was safe. Dominic watched through the slight crack in the door as Ava adjusted Ethan's blanket and smoothed his hair. There was no performance in her actions. No contract obligation. Just care. Dominic closed the door quietly and walked away. The next morning, the legal documents were signed. The engagement was official. The press release was prepared. And somewhere beyond the estate walls, the Volkov syndicate began to realize that their plan had not weakened Dominic Kane. It had given him something stronger. The Grand Meridian Tower looked like a palace that had been dropped into the middle of Manhattan. Its lobby was filled with white marble, tall glass walls, and soft music that floated like perfume. A long red carpet led to the ballroom upstairs, where the city's most powerful people gathered every year for the governor's charity gala. Tonight, the building sparkled with wealth. Ava Reynolds stood just inside the entrance, trying not to show how nervous she felt. The dress she wore was midnight blue and perfectly fitted, elegant but not loud. The diamond ring on her finger felt heavier than it should, like it carried meaning beyond money. Beside her, Dominic Kane stood calm and controlled, dressed in a dark suit that made him look even more dangerous than he already was. His face was unreadable. His eyes scanned the room with the focus of a man who never walked into any place without measuring it first. A man at the door announced them in a clear voice. Mr. Dominic Kane and Ms. Ava Reynolds. The ballroom went quiet for half a second. Not because they were celebrities. Because Dominic Kane's presence changed the air. Ava felt hundreds of eyes land on her at once. Some were curious. Some were shocked. Some were judging. And the whispers came fast. Is that her? The waitress. Look at the ring. She's with him? Ava tightened her grip on Dominic's arm, forcing herself to breathe slowly. Her heart beat hard against her ribs, but she kept her face calm. She lifted her chin the way she had practiced in the mirror. She walked like she belonged. Dominic leaned closer, his lips near her ear. Don't shrink, he murmured. If they stare, let them. They only stare at power. Ava swallowed and nodded. They moved forward into the crowd. Flashing cameras popped like small lightning strikes. The string quartet played softly in the corner, but Ava could barely hear it over the rushing sound in her head. Dominic introduced her to the most important people in the room. A judge. A city council member. A wealthy developer. A senator's aide. A group of men who smiled too much and asked too little. Ava responded carefully, smiling at the right moments, keeping her voice steady, listening more than she spoke. Dominic stayed close, his hands sometimes resting lightly at her waist, a silent message to everyone watching. She is mine. For a while it worked. Then the room shifted. A new presence arrived, and the crowd moved aside the way water moves around a shark. Ava saw him before Dominic said anything. Mikhail Volkov. He was older, tall, broad, with a shaved head and a cold face that looked carved from stone. A thin scar ran through one eyebrow. His suit was expensive, but he wore it like armor. Around him were men who didn't look like party guests. They looked like soldiers. At his side walked his son, Sergei Volkov. Young, confident, arrogant. The kind of man who enjoyed cruelty the way some people enjoyed music. His smile was sharp and mocking. Mikhail's eyes locked onto Dominic. He walked straight toward them. Dominic Kane, Mikhail said, voice loud enough for nearby guests to hear. So the rumors are true. Dominic's expression did not change. Mikhail, he replied calmly. Still alive. I'm surprised. A few people nearby laughed nervously, unsure if they were allowed. Mikhail's gaze slid to Ava slowly, like he was inspecting something cheap. And this is the replacement? He asked. The new fiancée? Dominic's hand tightened slightly at Ava's waist. She is Ava Reynolds, Dominic said evenly. Watch your tone. Mikhail smiled without warmth. My tone? He asked. I'm only curious. 1 week you're engaged to a senator's daughter, and the next you arrive with... He gestured lightly toward Ava. A serving girl. A ripple of shocked silence moved through the group around them. Ava felt heat rise in her chest. Dominic's jaw tightened. She could feel anger building in him like pressure in a sealed container. Sergei stepped forward with a grin. She's pretty, he said, looking Ava up and down. Pretty for a waitress. Tell me, sweetheart, how much did he pay you? Ava heard a few small gasps. Sergei's eyes gleamed. I'll double it, he added. I'm generous like that. Ava could feel Dominic's body stiffen. She could tell he was close to violence. Close to making a mistake in a room full of cameras. So Ava made a choice. She laughed. Not a cute laugh. A cold laugh. Sergei blinked, confused. Double it. Ava repeated slowly, tilting her head as if she was truly amused. That's cute. Sergei's smile faltered. Ava leaned in just a little, still smiling. Sweetheart, she said, her voice calm and sharp, with that cheap suit and that fake watch. I don't think you could afford to buy me a drink, let alone my loyalty. The people around them froze. Then one person snorted. Another chuckled. Sergei's face turned red in seconds. What did you say? He snapped. He lifted his hand as if to strike her. Dominic caught Sergei's wrist in midair. The movement was fast and smooth. Dominic's grip was iron. Sergei's expression twisted in pain. Dominic leaned closer, his voice low enough to be dangerous, but loud enough for those nearby to catch the threat. Touch her, Dominic said, and you will lose that hand. Sergei tried to pull back. Dominic tightened his grip. A sound like bone grinding made Ava's stomach twist. Mikhail's smile vanished. He stepped forward. Let him go, Mikhail ordered. Dominic released Sergei slowly, like he was letting go of something dirty. Sergei stumbled back, holding his wrist, humiliation burning in his eyes. The tension in the room had shifted. Even the music from the quartet sounded too soft now. A man in a tuxedo hurried forward, security staff sweating. Gentlemen, he pleaded. Please. This is a charity event. Mikhail stared at Dominic, then looked at Ava with open hatred. Enjoy your night, he said. Darkness comes early in this city. Then he turned and walked away, his men following. Ava exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Dominic did not move for several seconds. His eyes followed Mikhail until he disappeared into the crowd. Finally, Dominic turned toward Ava. You should not have done that, he said quietly. Ava's heart jumped. Was he angry? Then he leaned closer, his voice softer. I wanted to, Dominic continued. But you did it better. Ava let out a shaky laugh. I didn't want him to push you into something, she admitted. Dominic's gaze dropped to her lips for half a second. You were brave, he said. The ballroom felt too hot. Too loud. Too full of eyes. Dominic guided Ava through a side door and out onto the balcony, away from the crowd. The city skyline stretched behind them like a sea of lights. The night air was cold enough to clear Ava's head. Ava leaned against the stone railing, breathing deeply. Dominic stood close but not touching her yet. His presence alone felt like heat. You handled that room, he said. Most people crumble under that pressure. Ava swallowed. I was terrified, she confessed. Dominic's eyes softened slightly. You didn't look it. For a moment, silence held them. Then Dominic stepped closer. His hand lifted, and he gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind Ava's ear. His fingers brushed her skin and Ava felt the small touch like a spark. You're not what they expected, Dominic murmured. Ava looked up at him. And what did you expect? She asked. Dominic's eyes darkened. I expected someone who would run, he admitted. Ava's breath caught. Dominic leaned in slowly as if giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met. The kiss wasn't careful. It was intense, hungry, and full of unspoken emotion. Ava's fingers curled into the front of Dominic's suit, pulling him closer. Dominic's hand slid to her waist, holding her like he was afraid she might disappear. For a brief moment there was no ballroom. No politics. No danger. Only heat. Only breath. Only the feeling that something real was forming in the middle of something fake. Then, a sharp cracking sound shattered the night. Glass exploded behind them. Ava screamed and ducked. Dominic reacted instantly, throwing his body over her as bullets tore into the balcony railing where they had been standing seconds earlier. Down. Dominic roared. Inside the ballroom, chaos erupted. Screams. Running. Shattering glass. People dropping behind tables. Dominic grabbed Ava's hand. Move, he ordered. They ran. Dominic pulled Ava through a hallway, then into an emergency stairwell. Their footsteps pounded down the steps. Ava's lungs burned. Her heels nearly slipped, but Dominic kept her steady, dragging her forward with force. They reached the service level. The loading dock doors were ahead. A black van screeched into view, blocking the exit. The side door slid open. Men with guns. Dominic shoved Ava behind a concrete pillar. Bullets ripped through the air. Concrete chips flew. Dominic fired back, calm and deadly. Ava's mind raced. Her eyes darted across the dock. Then she saw it. A red metal lever on the far wall. A sign above it. Fire suppression override. Ava remembered working events here years ago. She knew what that lever did. She grabbed Dominic's sleeve. "Cover me," she shouted. Dominic snapped his head toward her. "What?" Ava didn't wait. She ran. Bullets pinged near her feet. The sound was loud and sharp. Her heart hammered like a drum. She reached the lever, grabbed it with both hands and yanked down hard. A violent whoosh exploded from the ceiling. Foam and high-pressure water blasted the loading dock. The air turned white. Visibility dropped to almost zero. The floor became slick instantly. Men shouted. Someone cursed. Someone screamed in panic as foam hit their face. Dominic moved through the fog like a shadow. 2 gunshots cracked. Then another. Then silence. Ava slid down against the wall, soaked, shaking, breathing hard. A dark figure stepped out of the mist. Dominic. He was breathing fast, but he was unharmed. He walked straight to Ava and crouched in front of her. For a second, he just stared at her like he couldn't believe she was real. Then he let out a rough breath. "You are the craziest woman I have ever met," he said. Ava's teeth chattered. "Is that a compliment?" she managed. Dominic's mouth twitched slightly, almost a smile. "It's the highest one I can give." They stood in the dripping foam, alive, barely. And in the distance, the city kept shining like nothing had happened, while the wolves in suits began circling closer. The Kane estate had never felt so tense. By midnight, every gate was locked. Armed guards stood at every entrance. The security room monitors glowed with camera feeds from every hallway, garden path, and perimeter wall. No one entered or exited without clearance. The drive-by attack at the gala had shaken Dominic more than he showed. It was not the bullets that disturbed him. He had faced violence before. It was the precision. The attackers had known exactly where he would be. They had known which balcony he would step onto. That knowledge did not come from luck. It came from inside. Dominic stood in the security room, staring at the footage replay from the hotel. Grant and several trusted men stood nearby, waiting for instructions. They knew the layout, Dominic said quietly. They knew the timing. Grant nodded. "We're reviewing staff access and communication logs." "Review faster," Dominic replied. Someone talked. Upstairs, Ava had changed into comfortable clothes and was sitting on the edge of the guest bed. The foam and smoke from the loading dock still felt real in her mind. Her hands trembled slightly when she thought about the bullets striking concrete inches from her feet. A soft knock sounded on the door. "Come in," she said. Dominic entered without his jacket. He looked exhausted but controlled. His dark hair was slightly out of place, and there was a faint cut near his jaw that had not been there earlier. "You're bleeding," Ava said immediately, standing. "It's nothing," he replied. She stepped closer anyway, examining the small cut. "You call that nothing?" she asked quietly. Dominic watched her as she reached for a tissue and gently wiped the dried blood from his jaw. Her touch was careful and steady. "You shouldn't have run across that loading dock," he said after a moment. "You shouldn't have walked onto that balcony," she answered. Their eyes met. The silence between them was different now. Less guarded. Less distant. "I've faced enemies before," Dominic said. "But this was too precise. Too organized." "You think someone told them?" Ava asked. "I know someone did." He looked away, jaw tightening. "They knew where I'd be," he continued. "They knew how to draw me out." Ava lowered the tissue. Then the danger isn't just outside, she said. No, Dominic replied. It's closer. For a long moment neither of them spoke. The estate felt quieter than usual. Too quiet. Dominic moved toward the door. Get some rest, he said. Security is doubled tonight. Are you? Ava asked. He paused. I don't rest during war. He left the room. The house fell into deep silence after midnight. Ava lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The events of the night replayed in her mind. Sergei's insult, the balcony, the bullets, the foam. She closed her eyes but sleep did not come easily. A faint sound pulled her awake. Footsteps. Slow. Careful. Not the confident stride of security. These steps were controlled. Intentional. Ava sat up. The hallway outside her guest room was dimly lit. She slid quietly out of bed and moved toward the door. Her heart began to pound. The handle turned slightly. Ava stepped back just as the door opened. A tall man stood in the doorway dressed in black. For half a second she thought it was one of Dominic's guards. Then she saw the gun in his hand. Where is he? The man asked quietly. Ava's breath caught. It was one of Dominic's own security lieutenants, Marcus Hale. She had seen him earlier in the evening, giving instructions in the courtyard. He worked for Dominic. Or at least he was supposed to. Ava didn't answer. Marcus stepped forward. You shouldn't have involved yourself, he said. The look in his eyes told her everything. He was not there to ask questions. He was there to eliminate a witness. Ava reacted without thinking. She grabbed the lamp from the bedside table and threw it at him. The lamp shattered against his shoulder. The room plunged into near darkness. Marcus fired. The bullet struck the wall inches from where Ava had been standing. She ran. Barefoot, she sprinted into the hallway. Another shot rang out. The sound echoed violently through the estate. Dominic, she screamed. Marcus chased her down the corridor. Ava's foot slipped slightly on the polished floor, but she kept running. She reached the staircase landing and turned sharply. Marcus was close. Too close. He raised the gun again. A shot exploded from the opposite end of the hallway. Marcus jerked backward. Dominic stood at the far end of the corridor, gun steady in his hand. His face was not angry. It was cold. Marcus staggered, then tried to lift his weapon again. Dominic fired a second time. Marcus collapsed onto the marble floor. Silence followed. Dominic walked forward slowly, eyes never leaving the fallen man. Grant and other guards rushed up the stairs seconds later. Dominic looked at them. Secure the house, he ordered. No one leaves. Grant nodded and began shouting instructions. Dominic turned to Ava. Are you hurt? He asked. She shook her head, though her legs were trembling. He was one of yours, she whispered. Dominic glanced down at Marcus's body. Yes, he said quietly. For the first time, Ava saw something break behind his eyes. Not weakness, but disappointment. War isn't always outside the gates, Dominic said. They stood in the hallway together, the weight of betrayal pressing around them. A small sound came from behind. A door creaked open. Ethan stood at the end of the corridor, his small face pale. Dad, he whispered. Ava's heart dropped. Dominic holstered his gun immediately. He moved quickly toward his son. It's okay, he said, kneeling down. You're safe. Ethan's eyes were wide. I heard loud noises. Ava stepped closer and knelt beside him. It's over, she said gently. Just a bad dream that ended. Ethan clung to her. Dominic watched the way she wrapped her arms around his son without hesitation. Without fear. Without thinking about herself. Grant approached quietly. Marcus was communicating with an outside number, he said in a low voice. Encrypted messages. We're tracing it now. Dominic nodded once. Check everyone, he replied. No exceptions. Grant left. The hallway was quieter now, but the peace felt fragile. Dominic looked at Ava. If you had not screamed, he began. I know, she said softly. He stepped closer. You almost died tonight, he said. So did you, she answered. He studied her face in the dim light. This isn't what you signed up for, he said quietly. Ava shook her head. No, she admitted. But I'm still here. Dominic's expression shifted. The cold distance he usually kept began to crack. You protected Ethan again, he said. Ava looked down at the boy still clinging to her. He deserves someone steady, she replied. Dominic reached out slowly and brushed his fingers against her wrist. A small touch, but full of meaning. For a second, something raw flickered in his expression. Fear. Not for himself. For her. He stepped closer until they stood inches apart. "If anything happens to you," he began but stopped. Ava reached up and placed her hand lightly on his chest. "Trust me," she said. The room was full of armed men and glowing screens, yet the moment felt strangely quiet. Dominic closed his eyes briefly. Then he nodded once. "We move in 30 minutes, he said to Grant. Grant immediately began issuing orders. Weapons were distributed. Bulletproof vests prepared. Vehicles readied. Dominic turned back to Ava. "You stay behind me once it begins," he said firmly. "I won't," she replied. "I'll be in front until it starts." He almost argued. Almost. But he knew she was right. As the team prepared to leave, Dominic stepped aside with her. "You are not expendable," he said. Ava swallowed. "Neither is he," she replied. Dominic studied her face as if trying to memorize it. Then he nodded. The convoy rolled out of the estate gates into the darkening evening. The abandoned steel factory waited at the edge of the river like a silent predator. Inside, somewhere within cold metal walls and broken windows, a 6-year-old boy waited. And for the first time since this war had begun, Dominic Kane was not thinking about power. He was thinking only about his son. The abandoned steel factory stood at the edge of the river like a dying giant. Its windows were broken. Rust clung to the metal beams. The wind moved through the hollow structure with a low, lonely whistle. Inside, hanging work lights cast harsh yellow circles on the cracked concrete floor. Ava stepped out of the car before anyone could stop her. She wore dark pants and a plain jacket. No jewelry except the heavy diamond ring still on her finger. In her raised right hand, she held a white cloth torn from the lining of her coat. Behind her, hidden in shadows and parked vehicles, Dominic's men took their positions. Dominic grabbed her wrist once before she walked away. "If they touch you." "They won't," she said, though her heart pounded wildly. "Not yet." He held her gaze for a long second. Then he released her. Ava walked forward slowly, raising the white cloth higher. The factory doors were already open. Inside she could see them. Armed men. And on the far side of the main floor, beneath a hanging work light, Ethan. He was tied to a metal chair. His small hands bound behind him. A strip of duct tape covered his mouth. His dark curls were messy. His eyes were wide with fear. And standing beside him, calm and watchful, was Mikhail Volkov. He looked exactly as he had at the gala. Cold, solid, dangerous. "Well," Mikhail called out as Ava approached. "The waitress returns." Ava kept her pace steady. "I'm here to talk," she said loudly. Mikhail laughed. "Where is Dominic?" he asked. "He's not coming," Ava replied, keeping her voice even. "He said he wouldn't risk his entire empire for one boy." Ethan's eyes widened at her words. It hurt to say them. Mikhail studied her carefully. "You expect me to believe that?" he asked. Ava took another step closer. "He sent me with an offer," she continued. $5 million. In cash. It's in the car outside." The men around Mikhail shifted slightly. Money had power. $5 million. Mikhail repeated. "Yes," Ava said. "You release Ethan. I take you to it." Mikhail's gaze sharpened. "And if it's a trick?" "It isn't," Ava said calmly. "You want leverage. Killing him now gives you nothing." Mikhail considered this. Then he nodded slightly to two of his guards. "Check the perimeter," he ordered. The men turned and moved toward the factory doors. That was the moment Ava had been waiting for. Her hand slipped inside her jacket sleeve. She felt the small metal cylinder Dominic had given her. A flashbang grenade. She pulled it free, pulled the pin, and rolled it across the concrete floor toward the center of the guards. "Down!" she shouted. The explosion was blinding. A white flash filled the factory, followed by a deafening bang that shook the metal beams overhead. Men screamed. Guns clattered to the ground. Several guards fell, stunned and disoriented. At that exact moment, the skylights above shattered. Ropes dropped from the ceiling. Dominic and his tactical team descended fast, controlled, and silent except for the sound of gunfire erupting seconds later. The factory became chaos. Bullets tore through the air. Metal rang. Concrete splintered. Ava ran straight toward Ethan. She dropped to her knees and ripped the tape from his mouth. "I've got you," she whispered quickly, working at the ropes around his wrists. Ethan sobbed but stayed still. Gunfire thundered behind her. Dominic moved like a force of nature. He fired with precision, eliminating 2 attackers near the loading dock. Another man rushed him with a rifle. Dominic disarmed him and struck him down in one brutal motion. Smoke filled the air. The lights flickered. Mikhail Volkov stepped back onto a raised platform, fury burning in his eyes. You think you win this? He roared. He pulled a revolver from inside his jacket. And instead of aiming at Dominic, he aimed at Ava and Ethan. Time slowed. Ava saw the movement. She instinctively turned her body, shielding Ethan with her own. No! Dominic shouted. Mikhail's finger tightened on the trigger. A single sharp crack cut through the factory. Not from the floor. From outside. Mikhail's body jerked violently. A red bloom spread across his chest. He staggered backward, disbelief flashing across his face. Then he fell from the platform, crashing hard onto the concrete below. Silence followed. Grant stood near a broken window, rifle steady, smoke rising from the barrel. Nobody touches the family, he said quietly. The remaining Volkov men dropped their weapons. The gunfire stopped. The factory fell into an eerie stillness filled only with distant echoes and the drip of water from broken pipes. Dominic reached Ava and Ethan within seconds. He fell to his knees in front of them. His hands moved quickly over Ethan, checking for injuries. Are you hurt? He asked urgently. Ethan shook his head, tears streaming down his face. Dominic pulled him into a tight embrace. Then he looked at Ava. She was covered in dust. A small cut marked her cheek. Her breathing was uneven, but she was alive. Dominic's hand trembled slightly as he reached out and cupped her face. You're bleeding, he said. It's nothing, she replied softly. He didn't believe her. He pulled both of them into his arms. For a moment there was no steel factory. No weapons. No enemies. Just three people holding on to each other in the middle of ruin. Ethan clung to Ava's jacket. Are we safe? He whispered. Yes, Dominic said firmly. The word carried weight. Around them, Dominic's men secured the area. Bodies were moved. Weapons collected. The Volkov soldiers were restrained and removed. With Mikhail dead, the structure of the Volkov Empire would crumble quickly. Without leadership, fear and loyalty would fracture. Grant approached quietly. It's over, he said. Dominic nodded. But his focus remained on Ava. She had walked into danger alone. She had faced Mikhail without flinching. She had shielded his son with her body. Not because of money. Not because of a contract. But because she cared. Dominic brushed dust from her shoulder gently. You didn't hesitate, he said. I didn't have time to, she answered. He let out a slow breath. You could have died. So could he, she replied, looking down at Ethan. Dominic studied her face for a long moment. Then he leaned forward and pressed his forehead lightly against hers. The gesture was quiet, private, full of meaning. When they finally stood, the factory floor was stained with smoke and dust. Mikhail Volkov lay motionless near the platform. The war that had threatened Dominic's family was broken at its center. As Dominic guided Ava and Ethan toward the exit, he kept one arm firmly around both of them. Outside, the night air felt cold and clean. For the first time since the poison attempt at the restaurant, Dominic allowed himself to believe something simple. They were alive. And the wolves who had tried to destroy them had fallen in their own slaughterhouse. 3 months later, winter had softened the Kane estate. Snow fell in slow, heavy flakes, covering the iron gates and long driveway in white. The cold air wrapped around the mansion, turning its sharp edges gentle. The guards still stood at their posts, but even they seemed quieter beneath the steady fall of snow. Inside, the mood was different. War no longer pressed against the walls. Phones did not ring in panic. The security monitors showed only peaceful grounds and drifting snow. In the kitchen, warmth filled the air. Ethan stood on a stool beside the marble counter, carefully spreading frosting over a line of gingerbread cookies. His tongue peeked out slightly in concentration. Flour dusted his sweater. A bowl of icing sat near his elbow. Ava stood beside him, laughing softly. That one has more frosting than cookie, she teased. It's armor, Ethan replied seriously. Snow armor. She smiled. The sound of his laughter echoed through the kitchen, bright and full. 3 months ago, he had flinched at every loud sound. Now he hummed quietly while decorating cookies. Peace had returned. At least on the surface. Ava wiped her hands on a towel and glanced toward the large windows. Snowflakes drifted slowly past the glass. The estate looked almost like something from a storybook. The war was over. Mikhail Volkov was dead. The attacks had stopped. The city had settled into a new balance of power. And the contract she had signed sat quietly in a locked drawer upstairs. $1 million had already been transferred into a secure account under her name. The debts were gone. The hospital collectors had stopped calling. For the first time in years, her future was not defined by what she owed. She could leave. The thought had been growing in her mind for weeks. The agreement had been clear. Temporary engagement. Protection. Public unity. The threat had been neutralized. Her part was done. She watched Ethan as he proudly held up a cookie covered in uneven white icing. Perfect, he declared. She smiled, but her chest tightened. Leaving would break him. Leaving would break her too. Footsteps entered the kitchen. Dominic stood in the doorway, snow melting slowly from the shoulders of his dark coat. He looked tired but calmer than she had ever seen him. Ethan jumped down and ran toward him. Dad. Look. Dominic crouched and lifted his son easily. That is a very serious cookie, he said gravely. Ethan grinned and ran off to show a guard waiting nearby. Dominic's eyes lifted to Ava. For a moment they simply looked at each other. You've made this place warmer, he said quietly. Ava swallowed. Snow does that, she replied lightly. Dominic did not smile. He walked closer, resting one hand against the counter. You've been distant, he said. Ava hesitated. She had not intended to speak about it that day. But the words pressed forward anyway. The contract is fulfilled, she said softly. The warmth in the room seemed to cool instantly. Dominic's posture stiffened almost invisibly. Yes, he replied. The threat is gone, she continued. The money is secure. Everything we agreed on is complete. Dominic walked to the sink and poured himself a glass of water. He took his time before turning back toward her. You want to leave, he said. It was not a question. Ava looked down at her hands. I don't know, she admitted. This was supposed to be temporary. Silence stretched between them. Dominic stepped closer. You are free to go, he said. The words landed heavier than she expected. I won't stop you. She looked up sharply. You won't? No, he said. I won't trap you here. The statement stung more than anger would have. Is that what you want? She asked. Dominic's jaw tightened slightly. What I want, he said quietly, is not the point. It is to me, she insisted. For the first time since she had known him, Dominic looked unsure. I forced you into this world, he said. You didn't choose it. I chose to stay, she replied. At first because you had no choice, he answered. Ava stepped closer. And now? He did not respond immediately. Instead he reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out. A folded piece of paper. He unfolded it slowly. The original contract. The document she had signed. He walked to the fireplace. Without breaking eye contact, he dropped the paper into the flames. The edges curled and blackened. The ink disappeared. It's gone, he said. Ava's breath caught. I burned it this morning, he continued, because I couldn't stand looking at it anymore. She stared at the fire. You're not obligated to stay, he said softly. Not for money. Not for safety. Not for Ethan. Then why are you letting me go so easily? She asked, her voice trembling. Dominic closed the distance between them. Because I am afraid, he said quietly. The honesty in his voice startled her. Afraid of what? She whispered. Of becoming the man who cages what he loves, he answered. The word hung in the air. Loves. Ava's heart pounded. Dominic reached into his other pocket. This time he pulled out a small velvet box. It was different from the first one. Smaller. Simpler. He opened it. Inside was a delicate platinum ring. The diamond was smaller than the heirloom she wore now, but it sparkled with quiet elegance. This is not the family ring, he said. This is not power. Not politics. Not alliance. He took a steady breath. This is choice. Ava felt her eyes burn. Dominic lowered himself onto one knee. The most feared man in New York knelt on the kitchen floor, flour dusting the fabric of his trousers. I don't want you here because of a contract, he said. I want you here because I can't imagine this house without you. Ava's hands trembled. I wake up at night to make sure you're still here, he continued. I watch you with my son and realize that peace is not something I earned before you walked in. She felt tears slip down her cheeks. I don't need a temporary partner, Dominic said. I need you. Fully. Permanently. He held out the new ring. Stay, he said simply. Ava let out a shaky breath. You're asking me to give up the option to run, she whispered. Yes. She looked at the ring. Then at him. I have one condition, she said. Dominic almost smiled. Of course you do. No expiration clause, she said firmly. No escape plan. No, until the next war. If I stay, it's not temporary. Dominic nodded immediately. Forever, he agreed. Ava slowly slid the heavy heirloom ring from her finger and placed it on the counter. Then she extended her hand. Dominic slid the new ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. She stepped forward and pulled him to his feet. I'm not staying because of safety, she said softly. Or money. Then why? He asked. Because I love you, she answered. The words were simple. True. Dominic wrapped his arms around her tightly, holding her like she might disappear. Outside, snow continued to fall over the estate. Inside, something far more important settled into place. Not a contract. Not an agreement. A choice. The snow had not stopped falling. It covered the Kane estate in a clean white blanket, softening the sharp edges of iron gates and stone walls. The world outside looked calm, untouched, peaceful. Inside, warmth filled the house. The celebration was small and private. No reporters. No cameras. No politicians. Only the people who mattered. A long wooden dining table had been set in the main hall. Candles burned gently. Fresh bread and roasted meat filled the air with comforting smells. Laughter echoed lightly against the high ceilings. Ethan sat between Dominic and Ava, swinging his legs under the chair. He looked happier than he had in months. This is better than the big parties, he announced proudly. Dominic smirked slightly. You don't like big parties? They're loud, Ethan said. And people stare too much. Ava laughed softly. Well, she said, this one is just us. Ethan turned toward her, serious now. Are you staying forever? He asked. The room quieted for a moment. Ava looked at Dominic, then back at Ethan. If you'll have me, she said gently. Ethan grinned and wrapped his arms around her. You can't leave, he declared. You promised to make cookies every winter. Dominic watched them carefully. The sight of his son leaning into her, trusting her without hesitation, settled something deep inside him. Later that evening the tone shifted. The celebration ended quietly. The table was cleared. The house returned to its calm rhythm. Dominic led Ava down a long hallway toward a set of double wooden doors. Are you ready? He asked. For what? She replied. To step into the real world, he said. The doors opened. Inside was the council room. A long table dominated the center. Around it sat 12 men. Some older. Some younger. All powerful. All silent as Dominic and Ava entered. These were the leaders of Dominic's syndicate. The men who managed territories, finances, protection routes, and alliances. They were loyal, but loyalty did not mean blind acceptance. Ava felt the weight of their stares. Dominic did not hesitate. He walked to the head of the table and stood tall. This is Ava, he said simply. Murmurs followed. One of the older men leaned back in his chair. With respect, he began, she is not from our world. Another nodded. An outsider cannot understand our operations. She is a risk, a third added. Ava kept her expression calm. Dominic's jaw tightened slightly, but he allowed them to speak. She was a waitress 3 months ago, someone else said quietly. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Dominic stepped forward. She is the reason my son is alive, he said evenly. Silence returned. That does not make her family, the older man insisted. Ava lifted her chin slightly. May I speak? She asked. The room fell still again. Dominic gave a small nod. Ava stepped closer to the table. You're right, she said calmly. I am not from your world. Several men exchanged looks. But I understand loyalty, she continued. And I understand protection. She glanced around the room carefully. You operate on fear, she said. And fear works. But loyalty built from respect lasts longer. One man frowned. You think we don't command respect? He challenged. I think you demand obedience, Ava replied evenly. There is a difference. The room grew quiet. She continued before anyone could interrupt. I don't want your positions. I don't want your territories. I don't want control over your operations. She looked directly at the older man who had objected first. I want stability, she said. For the family. For the future. For the children who grow up in the shadow of this empire. That struck deeper than she expected. A few faces shifted. You've all built something powerful, Ava said. But power without direction destroys itself. She gestured lightly toward Dominic. He has led with strength, she said. But strength alone is not enough anymore. The room stayed silent. I will not interfere with your decisions, she finished. But I will stand beside him. And I will protect what matters most. She stepped back. The tension in the room slowly softened. The older man leaned forward again. You speak boldly for someone new, he said. Ava met his gaze. I nearly died protecting this family, she replied. I have earned the right to speak. No one argued. Dominic looked at the table of men. This is not a discussion, he said calmly. It is a declaration. He placed his hand lightly on Ava's back. She is not temporary, he continued. She is not symbolic. His voice grew firmer. She is the future matriarch of this family. The word carried weight. Matriarch. Not partner. Not decoration. Leader beside him. If you stand with me, Dominic said, you stand with her. One by one the men nodded. Not out of fear. Out of recognition. The decision was sealed. The message spread quickly beyond the estate walls. The underworld understood what it meant. The woman who had exposed poison in a restaurant, who had walked into enemy territory unarmed, who had stood in front of bullets, was now officially part of the throne. Senator Crawford heard the news by morning. He made no public statement. He issued no threats. Silence was his only option. The political war he once threatened had dissolved. Without Volkov backing and without leverage, his influence over Dominic was gone. By evening the estate was quiet again. The council had left. The snow continued to fall. Dominic stood alone on the balcony looking over the grounds. Ava stepped outside quietly and joined him. The cold air brushed against her skin, but she did not move away. It's official, she said softly. Yes, Dominic replied. There was no tension in his voice now. Only steadiness. She looked out at the snow-covered trees. Are you afraid? She asked. Of what? He replied. Of giving someone equal ground beside you, she said. Dominic turned toward her. I'm not giving you ground, he answered quietly. I'm sharing it. She studied his face. Not ownership, he continued. Not possession. He reached for her hand. Partnership. The words settled between them. She stepped closer. You don't have to carry everything alone anymore, she said. He allowed himself a small, honest smile. And neither do you. They stood there for a long moment, the city lights faint in the distance, snow drifting softly around them. The world outside still held danger. Power still required vigilance. But inside the Kane estate something had changed. Not because of violence. Not because of money. But because of choice. Because of courage. Because of a woman who refused to stay silent. The waitress didn't just save a life. She rewrote the throne. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more interesting stories.